On tonight's early edition at 6, Russia announces a 7-point plan for ending the conflict in eastern Ukraine, but Kiev quickly dismisses it, calling it nothing more than political theater on the eve of the NATO summit in Wales. After being harshly criticized for its inability to formulate a decisive strategy against Islamic State militants, U.S. President Barack Obama says the objective is clear: to degrade and destroy the group. In the tech realm, Samsung unveils their new gadgets, but the real test begins a week later when rival Apple shows off their new iPhone. We have these and more coming up next.
It's 6 p.m. on Thursday, September 4th, here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Laah Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us. NATO leaders have gathered in Wales for what's being referred to as the most important gathering in more than a decade.
There are a handful of crucial topics to broach, including the Ukraine crisis and the growing threat of the Islamic State. Ahead of the meeting, British Prime Minister David Cameron, the chair of the summit, told the BBC that he is not ruling out military action in dealing with the IS militants who are believed to be holding a number of Westerners captive. Earlier, he and President Barack Obama expressed their determination to confront the militant group.
Eyes are also on how talks between Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko and the leaders of the U.S. and the EU will turn out a day after Kiev and Moscow went back and forth on terms of a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine.
And on the eve of the NATO summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin laid out plans for ultimately coming to a ceasefire agreement in eastern Ukraine.
However, Ukraine's prime minister was quick to slam Putin's remarks, saying it's part of Moscow's plan to deceive the West and avoid international sanctions. Our Son Jung-in tells us more.
Following a phone call with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko on Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin unveiled a 7-point ceasefire plan to end the bloody conflict in eastern Ukraine. Stating his views on the conflict were very similar to those of Poroshenko, Putin said the plan included a halt to separatist fire, a pullback of Ukrainian forces, an end to airstrikes, and the establishment of a humanitarian aid passage. Poroshenko, for his part, said he and Putin shared a mutual understanding on steps to ensure peace in the region, adding that he expected a substantive dialogue on reconciliation to take place during talks in Minsk on Friday. However, Ukrainian Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk dismissed the ceasefire plan, saying it was an attempt to deceive the West about Moscow's real intentions. With growing skepticism, France has also expressed its disapproval by delaying the delivery of 2 Navy assault ships to Russia. The UN says more than 1 million people have been uprooted from their homes and many more may follow, as it doesn't look like the dark clouds of war will lift anytime soon. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And degrade and destroy, that's the term U.S. President Barack Obama used to describe how the U.S. plans to deal with Islamic State militants following the brutal killing of 2 Americans by the group. Obama's pledge was echoed by Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. Here's our Hwang Sung-hee with more.
So the bottom line is this. Our objective is clear. And that is to degrade and destroy ISIL so that it's no longer a threat, not just to Iraq, but also to the region and to the United States.
Following U.S. President Barack Obama's pledge to destroy Islamic State on Wednesday, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel outlined the dangers posed by the terror group. In an interview with CNN, Hagel called IS something we have never seen before and added his job as Secretary of Defense is not to second-guess what may be or what's going to be. Pointing out that Islamic State controls half of Iraq and Syria today, the U.S. Defense Chief said Washington will do everything possible to destroy the group's capacity to inflict harm on the American people and values. Earlier this week, President Obama said he would send 350 additional troops to Iraq to protect U.S. interests in Baghdad and in the north of the country. after another American journalist was killed by Islamic State. While a fresh battle against the extremists seems inevitable, Pentagon officials estimate the weapons, fuel, and other expenses are costing the U.S. around $225 million a month. And that could be a difficult challenge for President Obama, who now has to reverse one of the key tenets of his two presidential campaigns, that money once spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan would be redirected to nation building at home. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
In other news, as announced earlier in the year, CVS, the second largest drugstore chain in the U.S., has taken cigarettes off its shelves. The company said in February that it would stop selling goods that conflicted with its healthcare mission, and it followed through by ditching tobacco products 3 weeks ahead of schedule. CVS has more than 7,500 retail locations across the U.S. It said its corporate name will also be changed to CVS Health and offer programs to help people quit smoking.
The battle against big tobacco continues here in Korea. Cigarette prices has remained steady at around $2.50 since 2008. Well, that may soon change if the government has its way as it tries to lower Korea's high smoking rate. Our Shin Se-min has this report.
Smokers in Korea will soon have to pay an extra $2 for a pack of cigarettes. This as the government and the ruling Saenuri Party have come to an agreement on raising cigarette prices in a bid to reduce the nation's current smoking rate. The change is nothing more than a proposal right now, but smokers are already looking ahead.
It is working as a motivating factor for me. I think I'll finally quit once the price goes up, both because of my health and the economic burden.
It's a burden. I don't think I'll be able to maintain the amount I smoke once the price goes up. It's just too much.
The 80% price hike on a pack of cigarettes would narrow the gap between Korea and the OECD average, which is $6.40. More than 37% of Korean males over the age of 15 currently smoke. That's the second highest rate among OECD member nations, behind only Greece. The low cost of cigarettes in Korea has been pinpointed as a major reason for the high smoking rate. Making them more expensive, experts say, will have an effect particularly on younger Koreans who are not economically independent. A quarter of high school students admit to having used tobacco at least once in their lives. Studies show that raising the price of cigarettes also has an effect on people who are economically independent. The consensus among global researchers is that a 10% increase in the price of cigarettes results in a 3 to 5% reduction in the smoking rate. The government says it's still fine-tuning the details of the plan, but the price hike will almost certainly happen in stages, as a sudden increase will likely be met with backlash by smokers. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
On the defense front, Seoul and Washington will establish a combined division of their troops next year with the task of carrying out wartime operations. South Korea's defense ministry says if formed, the unit would be a first of its kind around the world. It will be set up in the first half of next year and be headed by a major general-level U.S. officer. Details on the new unit's missions are not available right now, but officials say at wartime it would be tasked with carrying out special operations such as eliminating weapons of mass destruction and civil missions against North Korea. The ministry expects the new joint division to improve the allies' deterrence posture and boost their military capabilities to carry out joint operations.
It's a one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Laah Hyun-kyung and Daniel Choy.
Arirang News. Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
The latest data underline the need for urgent steps to raise household income. This as the Korean government plans on boosting consumer spending in order to break out of its low-growth trap. Our Song Ji-sun has this report.
Despite the need to boost domestic demand, Korean consumers are not earning enough to increase spending, as the corporate sector is sucking up an increasingly large share of the wealth generated by the country. Although it's a global trend that households face an uphill battle against corporations in terms of their proportion of a national income, the gap between the two sectors is widening much faster in Korea, according to data released on Thursday by the National Assembly's Budget Office. Households accounted for just over 62% of Korea's gross national income in 2012, down more than 8 percentage points from 1995. That pace of loss is twice as fast as the OECD average. On the other hand, Korea's corporate sector increased its share of GNI by nearly 7 percentage points over the same period, 4 times higher than the OECD average. The parliamentary office attributed the fast decrease in the Korean household share to poor performances by individually run businesses and dwindling interest income. Bank of Korea figures show that households' net interest earnings fell more than 75% to $4 billion over the last decade, when the corporate sector shed its interest burden by about 55%. To help increase the share of household income, the government is drawing up a package of measures that include revisions to the tax law, but some experts say encouraging investment should also be part of the plan.
To facilitate domestic spending, policies that encourage hiring or wage hikes should be promoted so that households actually gain disposable income.
The Park Geun administration has emphasized that boosting domestic demand is at the heart of its policies to revitalize the economy. 송지선, Arirang News.
And adding to potential concerns, the Korean economy grew at its slowest pace in nearly 2 years in the second quarter. The Bank of Korea confirmed on Thursday that the economy expanded just 0.5% in the April to June period on quarter in real terms, a shade lower than a 0.6% growth estimated in July. It compares with a 0.9% gain in the first quarter. The central bank points to lower than expected net exports as one of the major reasons for the sluggish growth. And with this, experts say this year's overall growth outlook of 3.8% might have to be revised down. Citing recent economic indicators, Korea's finance minister warned last week that the nation had entered the early stages of deflation. But as our Hwang Ji-hye reports, many experts seem to disagree. Take a look.
Korea's inflation rate has remained below the 2% level for nearly 2 years. The latest consumer price index has also pointed to a slowdown from a recent pickup. The index rose at its slowest pace in 4 months, rising 1.4% in August from a year ago. That also falls far below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. But many experts say the domestic economy running a low inflation rate does not mean it's headed for deflation.
When we say deflation, it means a minus inflation rate is continuing for such a prolonged period of time that people's expected inflation rate also turns to minus. So it's too early to talk about deflation.
They add that the focus should be on the nation's core inflation rate, which excludes volatile food and energy prices. And that index actually grew at the fastest pace in 2.5 years last month at 2.4%. Experts say Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan had political reasons for raising concerns about deflation.
There is a lot of fiscal policy that the government wants to engage in. For example, changes in the welfare policy, measures to try to invigorate some new industries. But that's all being held in status at the National Assembly. So I think this was his way to try to shock the National Assembly into moving on some of these issues.
Choi's comments also pressured the Bank of Korea to further lower its key interest rate with this month's monetary policy meeting just around the corner. But as concerns linger over the nation's mounting household debt problem, experts say it's likely the central bank will hold off a rate cut this month. The bank lowered the key rate to 2.25% in August, the first rate cut since May last year. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Korean automakers may have been more than happy to turn the calendar over to the month of September as both auto production and export figures dropped significantly in August due to labor strikes at Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors, as well as a reduction in the number of working days. The Trade Ministry says total vehicle output fell by more than 20% on year last month. Exports slid by nearly 19% to about 183,000 units, while domestic sales inched down 4%. Auto imports, however, went the other direction, with sales growing over 17% on year, the 11th consecutive month of a double-digit increase. And more than 200 energy experts from Korea and around the world have gathered in Seoul to discuss new investment opportunities in the renewable energy sector. President Park Geun-hye was also in attendance as they discussed problems brought on by global climate change. The Korean government had said it would use today's discussions to generate investment opportunities in the areas of electric vehicles, renewable energy, and energy storage systems. In line with what she said yesterday, President Park once again stressed the need to remove regulations that hold the private sector back from participating in the markets and expanding globally.
It's the moment of truth for faithful fans of Samsung. The tech giant has unveiled 4 new handset models, including the Galaxy Note 4 in Berlin. The initial reactions seem to be quite positive, but Apple is looming with an event of its own scheduled for next week. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
Samsung Electronics has pulled the curtain back on 4 new models, including its new flagship, the Galaxy Note 4. It comes with a 5.7-inch Super AMOLED display and a 16-megapixel camera with an optical image stabilization function. And unlike its predecessor, the Galaxy Note 3, the new version features a sleek metal frame design.
The Galaxy Note 4 will continue to set industry standard for how smartphones should help our lives become more enriched, more enjoyable, and more efficient.
Another new phone, the Galaxy Note Edge, is also catching the attention of industry insiders, namely for having a display screen that extends to the right edge of the phone, which can be used to show a scrollable panel of information.
For me, the most curious thing is Galaxy Edge, because I heard some rumors, but it was years ago. It was the most, the best device for me.
Samsung also unveiled a virtual reality headset and its new Gear S smartwatch model in Berlin. The releases come 1 week before Apple is expected to show off its iPhone 6 to the world. The speculation is that it will have a larger screen, similar in size to Samsung phones, and maintain the 2 rivals' heated competition in the global market. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, raining on Samsung's parade a bit was news that the company has been ordered to cough up more than 35 million euros, or roughly $46 million in fines to the European Union for the alleged price fixing of microcard chips used in mobile phones. An investigation into 3 companies, Samsung, Philips, and Infineon, began in 2008, and the European Commission says they colluded between 2003 and 2005. Samsung's fine has been reduced by 30% for cooperating with the investigators. Philips plans to appeal, saying they firmly believe the claims are unfounded. Shifting gears to a different story, talk to any foreigner who's lived in Korea for an extended period of time, and they'll tell you that shopping online can be a complicated and frustrating ordeal. But relief is on the way as the government is working toward changing what would be simplifying the process. Our Yurian has the details.
In 2008, the personal information of about 10 million people is leaked from an online shopping mall. Another 20 million customers fall victim in 2009 and 2010, when a total of 25 online shopping malls are hacked into. And since Koreans are required to provide their social security numbers, birth dates, and other personal info to sign up for a membership, all of it is exposed. Foreigners don't have the same problem because they don't have Korean social security numbers, but that presents another issue for them. as they're unable to shop online without such a number. To combat data leaks and increase the accessibility to online shopping malls for foreigners, the government has decided to do away with a number of measures by the first half of next year. Providing social security numbers will no longer be a requirement for Koreans when making purchases online, and foreigners will be able to purchase goods by verifying their identity through credit cards.
We are going to devise new regulations for core growth areas like e-commerce. To do so, we are going to set up a panel of people from different fields of expertise.
By breaking down the barriers to online shopping for foreigners, the government expects exports in the sector to increase to $300 billion by 2017, up from about 24 million last year. Yurian, Arirang News.
The Korean DMZ, or the Demilitarized Zone, is a popular spot for tourists who want a glimpse across the border at the north. It's an area fraught with an emotional history, but as our Im Yoon-hee reports, where there are emotions, there is the potential for art.
An area of Korea littered with remnants of the Korean War. On the fringe of the 38th parallel north, you wouldn't expect to find much at the Korean Demilitarized Zone, except for maybe skeletons of the destruction that divided a nation. So what would a collection of art be doing in an area like this? Argentinian artist Adrian Villarrojas shows that the Korean DMZ is in fact a fitting place for artistic inspiration, and he responds with a collection of art.
I absolutely fell in love with the place, and I had this sort of ambitious idea of use the town as a theater, as a huge studio.
And he's not the only artist to do so. Cellist Lee Oh-kyung fills the air with her music, an unexpected venue for the beautiful notes of the classical instrument. And artist Tomas Araceno's works includes a beautiful scene of the mountains of Korea, even including peaks from North Korea. Titled Degrees of Freedom, the binocular telescope captures a 360-degree view and the sentiments of many. These are just a few of the artists who are part of this year's Real DMZ project, a contemporary art project based on research conducted on the DMZ that brings a unique perspective of artists from all over the world.
And this is fascinating for me to try an exhibition that explores the field between politics and the art.
It's a project that experiments with unique productions and exhibitions and aims to bring awareness to the real DMZ. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
Now it's time for weather. It was another rainy day in the southern part of the nation, but a perfect fall-like day here in the capital city.
Fall-like indeed. Let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center for the latest. Michelle, so are we expecting some rain in Seoul?
No, we won't be seeing any rain anytime soon in the upper regions due to the high pressure front that's moving towards the peninsula.
And I believe that pattern will hopefully hold over the Chuseok holiday?
Actually, yes, the skies are expected to be mostly clear into the early next week. So if you have any trouble seeing the full moon, you won't on Monday. But if you have other outdoor plans, keep in mind that we're looking at temperature gaps between the days and nights around about 10 degrees. And speaking of that full moon on Chuseok Day, it's going to be 13% bigger and 30% brighter than it normally is. And it will first appear on Monday at 6:08 p.m. here in Seoul and a bit earlier in Busan. Now going over to our temperature readings for tomorrow. Seoul will start off the Friday morning at 18 before reaching up to 30 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will see highs of 32 and 30 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island is able to stay at 27, while Tokyo hits 28, and Gangneung makes it up to 30. Now that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. That's all we have for you at this hour. Thank you for staying with us. If you're tuning in from Korea, we bid you good night. This has been Daniel Choy.
And I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. For those tuning in from different time zones, have a great day. Daniel and I will be back same time tomorrow.